This video is long overdue, so let's finish the Pave Hawk. Alright, to mask canopies I prefer to use Scotch tape and a fresh hobby blade. Here I'm using a standard number 11 blade, but a curved number 10 blade also works well. With a number 10 you can actually rock the blade back and forth while applying some slight pressure and feel the blade snap through the tape. Whichever method you use, just be careful not to score the canopy itself. You only want enough pressure to cut through the tape and not into the plastic. Also, while I don't show it here, it helps to burnish down the tape along the edges with a toothpick before and after you make your cuts. When attaching the engine cover slides, be sure to put them in the correct orientation. The kit shows them in what I believe to be the wrong orientation compared to photo documentation. The Kitty Hawk kit that is made nowadays might have corrected this, or maybe it doesn't, but do your research, check it out, and let me know in the comments if I got this wrong or right. Lots of interior and exterior photo etch on this kit. I bought both the interior and exterior sets from Edward, and it was a lot of fun to add all this extra detail to the kit. Be sure to use a hard surface to cut the PE off the sprue. You don't want to use the rotary mat or something that gives. I'm using some plexiglass, and I'm also using a photo etch bender to bend the parts. This particular bender is from a place in the United States called the Small Shop. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore, but if you like this one, you still might be able to find it on eBay or from other shops. Some modification was done to the tail rotor using brass rod, a bigger rod inside the tail and a smaller rod attached to the rotor itself. This was just a little bit more stable than the mechanism that was included in the kit, which broke right away. So, quick fix, and it spins really nice. Next, I added some anti-slip paste from Ammo by MIG. I had used another product before this that made the surface a little bit uneven, and I wasn't pleased with it, so I went over it with the ammo paste and was very pleased with the result. The kit comes with 2 chaff dispensers, and the PE set comes with 4, so I decided to modify the plastic kit ones with some styrene board. The real helicopter has 2 chaff dispensers and 4 flare dispensers, so now I've got all 6, and I was very pleased with the scratch build result. Okay, now it's finally time to paint. First, I primed everything using UMP gray primer and filled in any remaining gaps that were still present. Pre-shading was not really necessary as I'm doing a 3-color camo that would likely cover it all up, but the base gray coat was almost identical to the primer, so this helped ensure even coverage. Masking was done using the AK camo putty and Tamiya tape. I really liked using the putty, but it does settle quickly, especially on vertical surfaces, so touch-ups were needed after all 3 colors were finished. After painting the other pieces, including the rotors, everything got a coat of aqua gloss prior to the decals. The decals used were a mix of the kit decals and an aftermarket set from Werner's Wings. The kit is quite old and most of the decals did not hold up, but the aftermarket set went down great and offered some extra details like the mustache. I also opted to paint all of the white stripes on the rotors and the radar dish instead of using the decals. It was a bit more work, but it was a much nicer finish. After the decals were done, the entire kit got a coat of satin varnish from Vallejo. I chose satin because it didn't make the black look too faded or dusty, but allowed for enough texture to do the weathering. I started the weathering with Tamiya panel line black and removed any excess with some enamel thinner. All the non-slip texture got a wash, as these areas would be walked on most often and I wanted it to look dirty. I prepped for weathering with clean enamel thinner before adding the oil paint, as I wanted to be able to remove this a little easier to give a more subtle streaking effect. I mixed a few different shades of oils to get the sand color I wanted. I wanted this to be a helicopter that looked well used in a dusty environment with a little bit of streaking from rain. This was my first time using oil weathering, so I was a bit nervous that I would mess up the paint job, but I must admit I was pretty happy with the way that the oils turned out. If you haven't tried oil weathering before and are apprehensive about trying it, just start with lighter colors and use a small amount to start. It's not an exact science, just think about the effect that you want to show and how the dirt and liquids would land and settle on the surface of the machine. After the oils went down, I tried another first, dry pigments. For the majority of the dry pigment work I actually mixed it with a bit of water. Using a small pointed brush, I added this wash to the desired areas and let it dry. Once the mixture is dry, you essentially just have dry pigment left over, but this is a much more precise way to apply it. Once the pigment dries, you can use a dry brush and or a damp cotton swab to blend the effect. Here are some photos of the final weathering result. The lighting in my workshop isn't great here, and the weathering is actually a bit more subtle in person than what the photos show. The next step was to add a bit of dry pigment to the figures as well. As they would be operating in the same environment as the helicopter, they would likely have the same dust covering their boots and clothes and weapons, and it just kind of added a nice bit of detail. Then I started putting some dry pigment inside the helicopter as well. I put some down randomly and then just began blending it all with a dry brush. I tried pushing the pigment up against corners and the tie-down rings in the floor where it would gather in real life. Can't forget the live resin 50 cal guns. These have amazing detail and looked great when painted with the photo etch barrels and flare dispensers. The rotor tips were weathered using a sponge and some yellow chromate to give the effect that the black paint had worn off. An effect I had seen online by another modeler, and I just really liked the way that this looked. The next step was to finish some detail on the main rotor. I added some electrical wires using lead fishing wire, and these T-joints were made using the coating off of a larger wire. Once painted, it gave a really nice effect. Finally, getting to add the figures in place was very satisfying. I painted these first back in 2019 before starting to build the kit, and although the gunners were a bit finicky, I was very happy with the way that they looked. Last but not least, the main rotor blade, again a bit tricky, but it went in just fine. So there it is. After starting this kit back in 2019, it's finally complete. There were a lot of firsts for me when building this kit, such as photo etch, resin parts, and scratch building. I don't think the younger me that bought this in 2004 would have thought it would have looked like this, but I'm sure he'd be pleased. I'm most pleased with the way the camo scheme turned out, especially considering how much work it took. But given all the issues I had with decals, I would say I definitely need to work on my airbrush skills because the texture is a bit rough in places. The figures were also a lot of fun and I think really tie the build together. So if you like the video and the build, be sure to give it a like and a subscribe. I plan on posting another video soon, so stay tuned. And if you have any questions about this one, please leave a comment. And now enjoy some slow motion photos. Wait, can still photos be in slow motion? I don't know. See you later.